Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Megan Glova. $1.5 billion. That's what Amgen is investing in Holly Springs. The biotechnology company said Thursday that it's expanding its manufacturing plants in the southern Wake County town, which has become a magnet for life sciences companies. WRAL state government editor and Daily Download co-host Jack Hagel broke the story ahead of the announcement, and he joins us now. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So Amgen announced plans this week to expand plans for a plant in Holly Springs. What can you tell us about that?
The company said Thursday that it plans to add 370 jobs as part of a new $1 billion investment in Holly Springs. And it's part of this broader strategy for it to expand manufacturing sort of across the globe. Now, this is on top of a previous announcement from last year when it said it would open a $550 million plant and hire about 350 people. So add that all up, it's a little bit more than $1.5 billion in investment and more than 700 jobs. It's a huge bet on the town. Now, the latest expansion is expected to be finished up by the end of 2029. The hiring is going to happen between 2028 and 2032. And, I should add that these are all high-paying jobs, the average of about $91,000, which is, 20% more than the county average. So it's a big deal.
And for those who aren't familiar with Amgen, what exactly does the company do?
So Amgen is one of the world's biggest biotechnology companies. It's based in California, has about 27,000 employees worldwide, has annual revenues in the ballpark of $30 billion. They focus on biopharmaceutical treatments for cancers, heart disease, osteoporosis, and inflammatory diseases, and a number of other things. And, they make medicines and delivery devices for some of those drugs. Now, the Holly Springs plant will help the company make drug substances used in some of those products.
And why go ahead and plan for a second plant when the first isn't even open yet in Holly Springs?
So the company has a pretty robust development pipeline. In other words, they're developing new drugs, and they need to beef up their production capacity. Now, drug companies are always working on new products, and analysts say that Amgen has a number of promising drugs on the way. One of the products that it's developing is a weight loss drug. In recent years, we've seen competitors make lots of money off of what are called GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. And Amgen wants to get in on that business. And the company didn't say this week which products it's going to be making at this Holly Springs plant, but people who are watching the company are wondering whether or not that'll be part of it, in large part because some of these weight loss drugs are already being developed and manufactured in the Triangle by other companies.
And any idea just yet, or maybe it's too soon to tell, how this will benefit Wake County or the Holly Springs area?
Well, just the main thing is taxes, obviously. Anytime a big company moves to an area and creates a lot of jobs, there's a revenue benefit from that, not only in property taxes, but also just residual business. Companies that have lots of people, those people need to find places to eat. A lot of people tend to want to move close to where they work. So there's this residual effect. The latest expansion alone is expected to boost the state economy by about $3.6 billion over a 12-year period. And that'll be generated right there in Holly Springs. And so that has a benefit for the broader county, has a benefit for the people who already live there in terms of what it brings there. It also brings some other things too, traffic, demands on utilities. And so as with any kind of growing area, those things are worked out over time.
Yeah, makes sense. Exciting stuff, though. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about who else is growing in the Triangle and beyond. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government Editor Jack Hagel. Jack, this is just the latest biotech company to grow in Holly Springs, so who else is expanding there?
So earlier this year, a company called Diosynth announced a similar type of expansion. The company said they're going to add 680 jobs and a $1.2 billion expansion. And that's part of a broader strategy for that company to grow in Holly Springs. And ultimately, they plan to hire 1,400 employees and by 2031. So, another big company growing out there. Now, another company is Securus, which makes vaccines, and they just finished a big plant. And they've received more than $100 million recently in a federal grant to make vaccines for avian flu. So there's all kinds of growth out there, and those will bring other companies as well.
And this region has a long history as a hub for life sciences companies, especially in Research Triangle Park. So why is Holly Springs suddenly the place to be for these companies?
So this is really kind of a symptom of the region's success. 30 years ago, companies would have been clamoring to get into Research Triangle Park, which is sort of that area between Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill that was set aside specifically for economic development reasons to attract these kinds of companies. Now, over the years, as RTP has filled in, companies have tried to move just sort of on the edge in Durham, Cary, Morrisville, those areas. And as those areas have filled in, companies are looking further down the road. That's why places like Holly Springs, Fuquay-Varina, and even in some of the counties beyond have really benefited. And, there's also, these municipalities are competing against each other, too, for some of these jobs. And so Holly Springs in particular has been focused on making some of its infrastructure improvements to lure companies, particularly those in life sciences. So there's a concerted effort. These towns are kind of recognizing that there's an opportunity for them, and they're starting to take some action.
And you mentioned this briefly, that maybe some surrounding towns could also benefit from the growth of biotech. Not just Holly Springs. Can we expand upon that?
Yeah, well, so we're seeing a lot of growth on the outer parts of the triangle, and now especially in the counties that are outside of what we would consider the triangle's core, like Durham, Orange, and Wake counties. So there's this area that's called the Biopharma Crescent. It's this 5-county region just on the edge of the triangle. It's lured a bunch of biopharma manufacturers in recent months and years. So those are like Edgecombe, Nash, Wilson, Johnston, and Pitt counties are the ones that sort of make up that region, and they all kind of work together to try to attract companies. Their thinking is kind of like, okay, well, the more we can get kind of to any of these counties, the better it's going to help all of us. They can create this kind of cluster. And so, the biggest announcement came in June, and that was, I should say, the biggest announcement this year. That was when Novo Nordisk announced a $4.1 billion expansion in Johnston County, and that's going to bring 1,000 jobs. The company already has a whole bunch of people here. So, and that's, I should mention, that's because of the weight loss drugs they've been developing. So, there's a lot of growth there. Now, over in Wilson County, there's been a whole bunch of companies. I think in the past year, several companies, I think like 1,400 jobs. It's a whole bunch of jobs. Janssen Biotech, as we mentioned earlier, they announced plans for a $2 billion expansion there. That could create 420 jobs alone. So there's a whole bunch of movement. And as I mentioned, some of this is a function of land availability, but also this sort of collaborative effort by counties and towns to really kind of lure these companies and set up infrastructure for them. Holly Springs, for instance, they teamed up with Fuquay and the city of Sanford, which has a big Pfizer plant, to pool resources to get water infrastructure, to grow capacity for water and sewers and that sort of thing. And those are the kinds of things that industries really look for when they're trying to grow.
And you had previously reported that the state offered millions of dollars in incentives to these companies. How, in the eyes of taxpayers, how do they view this exactly?
Well, that's right. So first off, the state approved an incentive package for Amgen, just as an example, for $6.5 million for this deal. And I should add that Holly Springs and Wake County are also considering incentives packages that could total $40 million, and they're going to consider those in the coming weeks. And that's all in addition to the $11.6 million that they offered Amgen the first time around. But you're right, and incentives can be controversial. Some people think, these multi-billion-dollar companies shouldn't be getting taxpayer dollars, and maybe there's a point to that. But states and other cities really compete for these factories and these jobs, and they're willing to offer big packages as well. So I think the state and these counties and towns sometimes feel like they have to compete, and they're willing to put up the money in order to get these jobs. Now, I should add that the state would be very quick to tell you, and economic developers in general will be very quick to tell you, that these companies don't just get the money. They have to really hit these investment goals and these hiring goals. So, if the company doesn't build the factory that they say they're going to build, or doesn't hire the people that they say they're going to hire, and doesn't retain these jobs, then they don't get the incentives. And I should probably add, it's not just a handout. A lot of times it's tax breaks and tax rebates and that sort of thing. And so, and in fact, this year, several companies canceled their incentives plans. They said, look, we're not going to be able to build this building. We're not going to be able to hire these people, or, in some cases, hey, we've got people working all over the country remotely. Things changed after the pandemic. And so because we're not going to be able to meet these promises, we're just going to cancel this plan, and you guys don't have to pay us. So, the state is saying, look, they're not just getting a handout here. They're actually going to add to the state economy.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we mentioned earlier, the latest Amgen deal is going to be, $3.6 billion for the state economy. So some might say that, a few $1,000,000 is not a big price to pay for that kind of economic impact. So,
Sure.
So we're going to be watching to see if Amgen and Novo Nordisk and all of these companies make good on their plans or if they change.
All right, going to be interesting to see these areas and these companies evolve. Thanks, Jack.
You bet.
That's WRAL State Government Editor Jack Hagel. For his reporting on the Amgen announcement and other economic development news, go to WRAL.com. I'm Megan Glova. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines, helping you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.